For some 15 years, Music Kitchen, Food for the Soul, has brought classical music to people who are experiencing homelessness. Its mission to uplift and inspire. Now, in celebration of that milestone, Carnegie Hall, in association with Music Kitchen, will present Forgotten Voices. It's described as a composite song cycle with music by established and emerging composers with text written by homeless shelter clients. Here to tell us more about this musical collaboration is the founder of Music Kitchen, violinist Kelly Hall-Tompkins. What a pleasure it is to meet you.
A pleasure to meet you as well. Thank you so much for your interest in my work.
And you know what? Honestly, first of all, you are such a gifted musician, but you also have just a huge heart. Tell us a little bit about what was the inspiration behind the founding of Music Kitchen, Food for the Souls?
Well, I can tell you I was preparing for a big solo concert, and I like to perform a run through of my repertoire for people before I do that. And usually I do that for friends and colleagues. But at that particular time, a friend of mine, a dear friend, was dying. And I was so swept up in that moment that I didn't really have a chance to coordinate with my friends. And so I happened to also be a volunteer cook at my church shelter at the time. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, I'll just go play for the guys at the shelter. But I felt terribly guilty about it because I thought, who but professional musicians can stand to hear a violin concerto with no accompaniment? That's something that musicians do for each other. But I thought for anybody else, that's like an element of torture. But I went there in a kind of desperation days before the concert, and they absolutely loved it. And we really bonded and connected with one another. And they even asked me if I would come back the next night. Mm-hmm. And I said, sure, but my concert's just in a few days. I leave town and, a few days, it's just going to be the same music. They said, we don't care. We want to hear it again. So I came back and I played the same music for them. And there was just even deeper bond. And I thought, it's probably unlikely that I happened upon the world's most, the biggest classical music fans. I think there's a deficit here. What I do in concert halls around the country and around the world, people that are in this shelter and shelters like it don't have access to it. And my mind immediately started thinking about what I could do to use what I do to fix that.
Yeah. So you decided to provide some of that food for the soul.
Exactly.
So what's the mission of your organization? You've been doing this about 15 years now, I said. And in that time, what else has revealed itself to you? And what have you discovered in providing this?
Oh, gosh, so many things have been revealed to me. I have learned so much. The artists that I bring in have learned so much. And, one of the most notable things is that people really connect with this music. And I hate to even say it, but even more in some cases than concert hall audiences. They really get it. Whether or not, and the audiences that we reach span the gamut. Some of them are neophytes to any form of live music. They've never seen a note of live music in their lives. And others are, former major donors and subscribers to major series. Homelessness has no prerequisite, so it really runs the gamut. And that's one of the most incredible things that we've learned, that people just intrinsically resonate with the music, and they just get it, and they feel it very, very deeply. And that's something that artists really appreciate, because we do this for a living because we feel the music very deeply. So to be able to share that experience with people who not only really appreciate it, but who really desperately need it at this time in their lives. So the mission is to bring comfort and accessibility to, improve the living conditions of those experiencing homelessness through music.
Yeah, it is absolutely beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about Forgotten Voices, because the whole idea behind it is just honestly really unique. You've got award-winning composers. So the intent here, because you're using this music is set to the words, really the words of people who are experiencing homelessness, text messages, right? How did that come about?
Well, actually, it is the prose concert feedback comments. So it is really very, it's fortunately, I had the idea from the very first concert. So that trial concert that I had in 2004 was just sort of what gave me the idea. But I worked on it. I raised some money, and I came up with the name Music Kitchen for about a year, and or about 8 months, and we started Music Kitchen in 2005. And fortunately, from that very first concert, I had the idea to solicit the listeners' comments on colored note cards. And so I've been collecting these colored note cards for 15 years.
Okay.
And as we were approaching the 15th anniversary, I've always treasured the sentiments that they leave for me to read about how our concerts affected them. But as we were approaching that anniversary, I had this idea to do something really historic and unprecedented, which is to set the prose incidental feedback comments. Usually for classical music, we marry the high art of music composition with the high art of poetry, and poetry by celebrated authors. The idea of setting the vernacular feedback, literally the equivalent of a Yelp review, and elevating it through, the lens of great compositions is something that hasn't really been done. And I'm very excited to feature the voices of a nearly voiceless community in our society and bring them center stage at one of the world's greatest concert halls.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just such an important message, I think, that you're signaling, this sort of bringing this awareness to the whole issue of what we talk about all the time, social justice and equity issues. And how that we all should feel in some way compelled to take care of those who are less fortunate than we are.
Exactly. I think there are a lot of forgotten voices among us, and through the pandemic, we had a delay in this project. We all had a delay in our lives, but I think it really pulled the cover back and revealed even more why a project entitled Forgotten Voices is even necessary. So I think the pandemic revealed a lot of places where forgotten voices lay, and not to mention created a lot more economic difficulty for those, increasing the ranks of those experiencing homelessness. So I think the last 2 years for all of us have touched on really the core of this project and how it can happen to anyone in any kind of unforeseen circumstances.
Yes.
But for the grace of God, could put any one of us in that situation. So we, as a society, as individuals, need to regard all of the members of our community with compassion.
Okay. Forgotten Voices, the Thursday, March 31st at 7:30, Zankel Hall. And I can send folks to carnegiehall.org for ticket information.
Yes, we are ecstatic to partner with Carnegie Hall in bringing this to the world for the first time. And yes, you can go to carnegiehall.org for Forgotten Voices on March 31st.
It sounds like it is going to be an absolutely beautiful evening. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Sandra Bookman, and Here and Now. We'll be right back.